too. But when it comes to Africa, he's a toddler. You know, this guy, he hasn't even walked yet. He's crawling. I am 100% against convincing anybody to go to Africa or anywhere else.
Focus, man.
Today, I'm doing a reaction video to Skylar's rant on Africa. So I don't usually do reaction videos, but this one just caught my attention. If you guys don't know my background, Jay Focused, I'm the most well-traveled brother in the black male YouTube space. And I say that not disrespectfully towards anyone, it's just a fact. I've been to more places than any of these brothers. So when I give you my perspective, it is very well informed. I've been to over 80 countries, all regions of the world, you name it. So I'm coming at you with that background. Now, the brother Skylar, he's entitled to his opinion. He has his perspective, but I want to break down some things that weren't quite accurate and is going to give you a whole nother perspective on what he's saying. That's his truth. I'm giving you guys a broader truth, and I'm going to rebut some of the points and things that he said. Okay, so my brother Skylar came out swinging. He said that no one pulls baddies in Africa. Do y'all believe that? Y'all believe nobody pulls baddies in Africa and we're just going to Africa for the safaris? Brothers just love to see cheetahs and lions. That's what we're out there for. Okay, that does not make sense. And I'm going to break it down to you why. He was saying that no one pulls baddies because he doesn't see receipts. Now, first off, what is a baddie? He showed a picture, which was very helpful to kind of, center the conversation of what he considers a baddie in South Africa, right? So women like that get pulled all the time by brothers from the States, brothers from England, brothers from other places in the world who visit Africa. Now, the reason why you may not see so many quote unquote receipts is because everyone in Africa is not doing P for P. I want y'all to know that straight up. That's one of the beautiful things about Africa is that exists if you want it, but for guys who are not into that lifestyle, that does not have to be your only lane. You don't have to sit there and study Spanish. You don't have to sit there and study Portuguese for X amount of hours before you can be conversational. In many different African countries, especially the most popular ones, you can get off the plane and you already speak English. And the locals already understand English, and there's no expectation for you to speak anything other than English. They identify with the fact that you're Black American and you're going off of that cultural context. So you don't have that in Brazil. You don't have that in places in Latin America. One of the reasons you don't see receipts so much from African women is many African countries are somewhat conservative. Now, if you go to South Africa, you would think you were in San Francisco if you're in Cape Town, right? That place isn't conservative. But I'm saying the fact that girls still have a reputation, they still live with their family, they tend to have more intact families than in Latin America. You have an egregious amount of single moms in Latin America. People forget about that. A lot of times people will show you a picture of this baddie in Medellin, this quote unquote baddie in Rio, but somehow they leave out the fact that, she's got 2 kids already. She might be 22 and she's already got 2 kids. And maybe she got tattoos to cover the stretch marks up. Maybe she got every kind of surgery you can think of. Very few women go under the knife in Africa. It's not really a concept. You could say it's because they can't afford it, but a lot of times the girls have very beautiful natural bodies. And you're being disingenuous if you're telling me in South Africa, the bodies cannot go neck to neck, toe to toe, thigh to thigh, buttock to buttock with girls in Rio who already had surgery done. Girls in Rio are going to their surgeons and showing them pictures of what a natural South African woman already looks like. Right? So let's put that out there because a lot of times people forget about that, right? And I know this is shocking to some people, but there are beautiful women on this planet who do not seek attention. They are not attention whores. They do not want to be on camera all the time. This still exists in Africa. This does not exist in Latin America. Last time I checked, Brazil had the highest number of Instagram users per capita, right? So every girl is trying to get clout. Every girl is trying to get exposure. It's a very hedonistic, ultra liberal culture. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. If that's what a brother is looking for, go for it. But Africa is a little bit different. Africa is still traditional to the point where you could have a baddie who's an 8, who's a 9, and she's not out there selling, what? She's not trying to be a Instagram quote unquote model. She's just trying to play her role. She actually has a real job. She actually has a real education. And that's not only in South Africa. I was using that as an example because the brother showed a model from South Africa. No, I'm also talking about, females in places like Kenya, places like Rwanda. I could go on and on. There's so much beauty in Africa. And it's funny to me that a guy who's been to one African country said there's no variety in Africa, which is crazy to me. Now, I've been to 20 African countries. I know most Africans haven't been to 20 African countries. Even most African YouTubers probably haven't been to 20 African countries. And shout out to Go Black to Africa. I think he beat me. He's at probably 40 countries by now. But the majority have not seen as much of Africa as I have seen. And if you think there's not a lot of variety in Africa, you're crazy. I've been to Morocco. I've been in Namibia. I've been to Burundi. I've been to Ethiopia. I've been to Kenya. I've been to South Africa. Are you telling me the women look the same in all of these countries? I've been to Durban, South Africa, where you got Indian women galore. I've been to Cape Town, South Africa, where you got white women, you got mulatto, mixed, colored, whatever you want to call them, women galore. I've been to, like I said, Ethiopia, where you have the Habesha look, which you're not going to find a Habesha look in Brazil. And I've been to Salvador, so you can't tell me about Salvador. I've been to I've been to Floripa down south. I've been to Rio. The look that Habesha women have, there's a certain look that you're just not going to find it in Brazil. And the same with women from Rwanda. There's a certain look that you're just not going to find in women in Brazil, and vice versa, right? There's women who live in Manaus. There's women who live in the Amazon regions of Brazil that look just doesn't exist in Africa anywhere. I can give you that, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, I'm going to tell you that you're not going to find women who have the same Habesha look in Brazil. I just haven't seen it. And we could go on and on. I mean, I didn't even mention Egypt. I've been to Egypt before. To say that you have more variety in Brazil, which is a country of, let's say, 200 million, maybe a little bit less, versus Africa, which is a continent of almost 1 billion people, to say that it just doesn't make much sense when you consider that a lot of the DNA in Brazil came from Africa originally. And the fact that in Africa, you also have Asian communities, you have Indians, you have Chinese, and on and on. Now, I understand that the blending has gone on in Brazil for a longer time. And like I said, I gave Brazil its props that you do have unique mixes that are only found in Brazil.
So hit that like button. I'm putting in work out here. I swear to y'all, I'm putting in work.
As it comes to diversity, nah, I'm not giving it to you, man. You got Lebanese in West Africa in big numbers. You got Persians. I mean, literally anything you could find in Brazil, you can find on some level on the continent of Africa, except the Amazonian chicks. I give you that. Y'all got them jungle chicks. We don't have the jungle chicks, from Apocalypto. You don't have the Apocalypto bras with the red paint on their face. You don't have that in Africa. I give you that one. The Pocahontas. You got that, all right? One reason why you don't have a lot of brothers leaving receipts of the baddies in Africa is because you got thirsty brothers trying to slide into DMs as soon as you post a picture, a video of a baddie. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of thirst out there. And it's cool when you're doing a P for P situation, and hey, you might even get a cut out of referring this girl on to somebody else. But if these are regular women who have regular lives, who have families, etc., you don't want everybody and their mom having access to a chick that could be your main piece. You know what I'm saying? It could be your side piece, but that's somebody that you actually care about and could actually have a relationship with. It's different when this is a short time girl. You hand her something and then she goes away. In that case, yeah, it's a business arrangement. And, I'm not knocking brothers who do that. It might make a lot of sense on paper, but that's not what's always happening on the African side of things. Also, you have to realize that there are a lot less brothers traveling around Africa and posting it on YouTube. So it makes sense that you're going to see far less receipts than you are on Brazil, than you are on DR. I mean, if you want to compare how many Black Americans travel to Latin America versus Africa, we're talking like 90 to 1. So obviously you're going to have 90 to 1 on the amount of receipts, on the amount of baddies. And to me, that's a good thing, because honestly, I hope a lot of ninjas stay where they're at. I'm not trying to get everybody and their mom to come to Africa. If you're saying Latin America is better, Latin America has better baddies, I'm all for it, man. Africa is for those who are ready for it. Everybody ain't ready for it. I'll put myself out there. I started off traveling in Latin America. I've told this story before. When I was 18, I crossed the border like right after my 18th birthday, because if you live in California, you probably noticed, Southern Cal especially, you could cross the border after your 18th birthday and go drink. I mean, back in the day, you probably could do it at 16. Nobody was checking IDs in Tijuana, and you could go on a day trip. You could go for the weekend with your homies, your older homies. And that's how I first got used to Latin America. That's how I learned Spanish. And that's how my journey started. At that point, at 18, was I ready to go to Africa? No, no, sir. If you would have dropped me in Africa, I would have been like, let's get up out of here at 18. But the world has changed. There's far more information out there. And I kind of look at it like Latin America is your training wheels. You know, it can get you used to traveling. It can expand your view of the world. And then for certain people, that's where they're going to stay at. And then for other people, you know, they're going to expand beyond that. They're going to check out Asia. They're going to check out Europe. They're going to see the whole world. You know, everybody is not a traveler. Some dudes are just like, I'm sick of the situation with American women. I want to go somewhere where the women are feeling me. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? This is not me dissing anybody. You know, everybody's got a lane. I think as long as you're happy and you're not hurting anybody, man, more power to you. Do your thing, bro. So Skylar also tried to say that another reason he doesn't see receipts of quote unquote baddies in these countries is because there aren't that many of them. That may or may not be true. Your definition of a baddie is not my definition of a baddie. But as long as I can get them, I really don't care if there's not 5,000 of them. If there's 100 of them and I'm getting 50 of them, that's more than I can eat, man. My plate is full. So I look at it from that perspective. But some people, like you said, they need to see some things all day long that they may have to pay for. Some people are cool with that. Me, as long as I'm seeing enough of what I want and it's on my terms, I'm good with it. I'm Gucci. So the brother Skylar said he doesn't run game because he's retired. I'm not mad at that, but you got to realize that a lot of people watch your channel. A lot of people in your space are not retired. A lot of dudes are still in the trenches. A lot of dudes are still putting in work. A lot of dudes still got that fire in their belly. You feel me? And they're game spitters. You know, maybe here and there they may do some other type things, but overall they're about that game. They're about that real attraction. They're about that real connection. There are still brothers who exist like that. You know, so what works for you works for you. What works for these brothers works for those brothers. So there's not one way. I feel like we should not be at odds against each other when it comes to this. If you're coming from Tyler's frame, what he says makes a lot of sense. If you're coming from another frame, what he's saying is not going to square with your reality. And I'm just putting that out there that his way is not the only way. So Skylar talked about scams. If you've traveled like me, man, scams exist in any developing country. Now, does Africa have scams? Absolutely. Does Asia have scams? Yes. Does Europe have scams? All day long. I'm going to reveal where I'm at right now. I'm actually talking to you guys from Spain. I'm constantly on the move. I got scammed just yesterday. I went to a place to get acai. I love acai. I eat it pretty much anywhere in the world where I'm at. I had some acai in Africa. Anyway, I went to the place to get acai, and the woman who was the cashier, she was not a Spaniard. She was, I believe, Colombian or another Latina from that region, right? She wasn't Brazilian. Definitely was not. And she's tried to scam me out of €2 change, and it was not. So I gave her a €20 bill, and she gave me change and just completely stole €2 from me, and I had to call her out on it. So this just goes to show you, in Europe, in America, wherever you're at, you do have to be vigilant. Have I been scammed? Yes. And my channel, I try to keep it 100 with you. I've mentioned I got scammed off Airbnb in Ethiopia. Now, with the hotels, I never had any issues, and in most countries and most Airbnbs I've stayed at, I haven't had issues, but I have spoken about the times that I have had. Would I say that the chances of getting scammed in Latin America are higher versus Africa? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. How can a brother talk about scams when in Latin America, people are getting scopolamine? People are losing their life. I've yet to hear a story about a brother going to Africa and losing his life, unless it was on some crazy stuff. Like there was one dude, he went to like a terrorist group in Chad or something really weird where he could have been a CIA agent for all we know. But I've never heard of a brother going just to have fun, see the sights, maybe meet some beautiful women in Africa, and he ends up dead. I've just never heard that story. And we hear reports like that coming out of Colombia all the time. We hear reports like that coming out of Brazil all the time. So perhaps in Africa, somebody might scam you out of $5, $10, $15. In Latin America, they killing brothers. So you can't even line up the two things and compare them. So this is a very weak argument. I've been scammed just as much in Eastern Europe, staying in Airbnbs, as I have in Africa. As I mentioned, I only got scammed in Africa off Airbnb in Ethiopia. But in Eastern Europe, I've been scammed in Croatia. I've been scammed in Bulgaria. I've been scammed in Serbia. I've been scammed in a bunch of places in Eastern Europe. Now, I still travel to Eastern Europe. I still travel all over the world. But no matter where you go, you need to be aware of scams just across the board. When you're leaving your country, the rules change. People are hungry. The poorer the country is versus the states, the more likely you're going to be scammed. I use that as a general rule. And if you do your due diligence, your research, you reach out for consultations, you can avoid a lot of this stuff when someone already can say, look, this is a good Airbnb. I recommend it. It's where you need to be. You're going to be close to the bars. You're going to be in a nice neighborhood. That kind of thing is why using the advice of people who are experienced is going to save you a lot of headaches. You might say, man, I ain't getting a consultation. That's $25, $50, whatever. But on the back end, you're going to lose potentially hundreds of dollars, even thousands, if you try to do it your own way and nobody's coaching you whatsoever. So Tyler touched upon tribalism in Africa. Now, how can you talk about tribalism in Africa, which exists across the board? I've mentioned it on my channel. I've done videos specifically on tribalism. I'm not the brother who's out here trying to sell you a dream about Africa and really trying to get everybody and their mama to come to Africa. I don't want that. I want the Pookies, I want the Ray Rays to stay at home. I can't stop them. They're going to come anyway, but I would not encourage them to come. I would encourage brothers who are a little more seasoned, a little more intelligent, let's just call it what it is, a little bit more polished, right? To come to Africa. Absolutely. You are going to be loved, you are going to be respected, and you are going to help the image of Black Americans, Canadian Americans, Black British, wherever you're coming from, all around the world. So you cannot compare tribalism in Africa for a foreigner, a Black American, to the racism that exists in Latin America for a Black American. Now, some people will try and say that in Latin America, when you speak English, they don't discriminate against dollars. Now, that is bullshit. I've been to Brazil, I've been to Colombia, I've been to many places, and on a certain level, your money still does not make you white. And they highly, highly, highly prefer white people. You could say this is across the globe, and I would agree with that. But the difference is the violence and complete disrespect that you're going to receive at times, not all the time, in Latin America for being Black, especially when they don't automatically know, because they're not always going to know you're American, especially at a first glance, is not comparable to other places. I've spent a lot of time in Asia. I've spent a lot of time in Africa. I spent a lot of time in Europe, and no place other than America that I've been to, out of 80 countries, have I feared for my life due to racism than in Brazil and in Colombia. Nowhere else have I had issues with the police other than in Brazil and Colombia. No other places have I dealt with security guards, people thinking they're Rambo and carrying a gun, and your Black life does not matter worth a damn than Colombia and Brazil. Now, those places have lots of good things going for it. I'm not telling dudes to not go to those places. And like anything, your mileage may vary. If you go for a quick trip anywhere, you're barely scratching the surface of what goes down for Black people and what it's like really living in these environments. But these considerations I don't have when I'm in Africa. And like I said, not just one place, all across the board. I've never felt like my life was in danger. I could be shot and there's not even going to be really an investigation like I have in Latin America, because they're so used to dealing with low value Blacks that it's hard for them to just flip that switch and reset and say, okay, this is a high value Black. Now that can change if you are super light skinned. If you look like Blake Griffin, then forget everything I said. If you are a high yellow brother, if you have a complexion similar to Skylar's, you are not going to experience the same things if you have a complexion similar to Kevin Hart, right? And if you're somewhere in the middle, then you're going to be treated somewhere in the middle. If you're going to lean darker, you are going to have much worse encounters and interactions over the long term. Now, if you're just going to stay in a tourist zone and you're just going to pay for play all day long, then you're never going to really experience that. You're living in a tourist bubble, and there's nothing wrong with that too, if that's what you want to do. But realize where you're at, in that your experience is very narrow and very, very limited in these places. So Skylar is coming from the position of a very light-skinned Black dude. And most Black Americans are not as light as him. most Black Americans don't have the same features that he has. So you can't look at his experience and say that all Black dudes, Black Americans in particular, are going to be treated the same way as him or have the same experience. Of course, if you're, shelling out money for the females, then money is going to equalize things a bit. But I'm talking about daily interaction. You're not spending 24 hours of the day in bed with a female, right? At some point, you're going to have to go out and do things and interact with people if you're living in these places and you're not just going for a vacation. And when it comes to those things, like actually living in a place, the African experience and the Brazilian experience are going to be completely different. Skylar cannot really speak on Africa because he has not really experienced Africa. He experienced one country. And of course, to get rage clicks for the video, he's going to title it Africa, right? But my guy has only been to one place. If he would have titled it Brazil versus Djibouti, nobody would have clicked it. People would have been like, what is Djibouti, right? So I respect his opinion, and some of the things he said make sense for him, but you can't speak on Africa in any intelligent, educated way if you've only been to Djibouti, which is essentially a military base. I think there's 5 different countries military in this country, and it's a very small country. So to use essentially a military base experience to critique Africa, it just doesn't hold water, and it doesn't hold any logic, And I'm not saying I want to debate this brother. I'm just reacting to it. His opinion is his opinion. I'm just letting brothers know that there are a lot of holes in things that he said. There's a lot of flaws in his logic, and he's not the person to even comment on this kind of stuff because he's the Brazil expert. I'll give him that all day long. I respect people who have a strong knowledge base in whatever. He is an expert in finance. I respect that too. But when it comes to Africa, he's a toddler. This guy, he hasn't even walked yet. He's crawling. So it's important to put that into perspective as well. When it comes to Brazil, I'm not an expert. You know what I'm saying? I'm not crawling when it comes to Brazil. I speak Portuguese. I've been there several times. I've been in several cities, but I'm still walking there. I'm not running. So my guy talked about food quality in Africa, and this is probably his strongest argument. I will say that most of the places that brothers travel to in Africa and our space, it tends to be East Africa and Southern Africa. And the food in East Africa and Southern Africa is not going to blow your mind if you're coming from the States, for most people, right? But I will say the food from West Africa is some of the best in the world. I would put West African food toe-to-toe with Brazilian food, Vietnamese food, almost any food on earth. To me, the best food in the world is West African food and Caribbean food. Now, the good thing is in East Africa, you can find plenty of Nigerian restaurants. You can find a decent amount of Jamaican food, and you can see on my channel where I go to different spots and I give recommendations. Brazilian food is good too. Latin American food in general is mid, And when I say mid, I don't mean it in a bad way. It's average, I would say. I could eat Latin American food, but it's not like, oh my God, this is amazing. I get that, oh my God, this is amazing when I have Caribbean food or when I have West African food. And I'd say East African, Southern African food, it's mid-tier as well. So there, I think that I understand his video was more or less a rebuttal to the people you get in your comments sometimes who are like, you need to go to Africa. You need to go to Africa. Well, I'll give you guys some background. When I first started my channel in 2018, I was starting off my channel when I was living in Europe. And I got a whole bunch of comments saying the same thing. Hey, brother, you need to go to Africa. You need to go to Africa. And I went to Africa, but it was not because of people telling me to go. I am 100% against convincing anybody to go to Africa or anywhere else. I don't get the logic behind that. It would be weird for you to hop on a dude who loves Mexico and be like, hey, brother, you need to go to Indonesia. Now, I understand that's not exactly the same thing. People talk about, well, our roots, our blood or whatever are in Africa, and that's cool, but you're never going to convince somebody in a comment section to go to Africa. It's just not going to happen. What would actually work if you wanted people to reconnect and get with their African roots would be to do your own video. Show yourself in Africa. Show the way you're enjoying it. Show the way that you're interacting people. Show the value of going to Africa. That's the best way to do it. You're never going to be able to badger, convince. At the end of the day, you're a stranger in some comment section. They don't know anything about you. You can see them. They can't see you. The best way, if you want people to go to Africa, whether you're one of those super duper woke brothers, is show yourself in Africa. That's really the only way to do it. You got to put your money where your mouth is. You got to show and prove in this era. Just telling people, hey, your ancestors came from XYZ country, you need to go there. That's not convincing at all. That's actually going to make people angry and less likely to go to Africa, or less likely to explore, because it's like, I'm a grown man, you're a grown man. Who are you to tell me where to go? Are you going to finance my trip? I can see why he's made this response. I can see why other people have made similar responses saying, this is why I won't go to Africa. I enjoy Africa, but I enjoy the whole world. Africa is special to me. I can see myself one day settling down and living permanently in Africa, but a lot of brothers are not going to get to that point. And the best way to get them to that point, if that's your goal, is going to be by showing your own receipts, showing your own videos. So that being said, it's no beef with Skylar. The brother's got his opinion. Shout out to him. He's holding down things out in Brazil. And that's pretty much it. Until next time, this was your guy, Jay Focus, reminding you to stay focused.
This thing is a life that's better than y'all.
Focus, man.